Hi, friends. My husband just made fun of me because I said he always goes, "Hey," right before I'm getting on because I guess I say that a lot. So I said I need a new intro. So I'd say, "What's up, my homies?" And he said, "No, that is not what I should be using." So I need a tagline, friends. Not a tagline. Ooh, that drink tastes bad. Um, I need a hello that's not hey, but whatever. So let's see what has happened with me today. We went up to school, fifth graders, got to see quite a few of y'all today. Um, and they picked up their stuff. I think we only had six fifth graders that did not come up to school. So that's pretty good. It's not bad. What else? What else? What else? I don't know. I'm looking around like I should be looking for something. I could check the Padlet. You know what's funny? Is that I think I've forgotten the last couple of times to put anything like a question on the Padlet. I think I'm a little worn out. I think that's what it is. Let's see. Let's see. I mean, I think it's been, not too bad. Just the last two. Joanna gave me stuff about Pan. There's a cuckoo. I'll be reading tonight. Oh yeah, that day when did I tell you I scheduled it for the wrong day? Yeah, it probably happens. Okay, so last night, somebody gave me, Charlie got the stoat, another picture of the stoat. Let's see if y'all can see that. If it'll open. Charlie, I got to see Charlie today. It was good to see you today, Charlie. Those are really cute little things. They're not very nice. Oh, don't go away. In the thing. I hope Toad kind of changes tonight, don't you? Just to be a little bit of a better guy, or frog, or Toad. Charlie got us a weasel as well. Ooh, well, I kind of like them too, Charlie. They're kind of fun looking. Look at those claws. But they're cute. Those are little baby weasels, probably. And then Charlie got me a ferret, but a picture's not coming up, Charlie. Oh, there it is. We've all seen ferrets probably at the grocery store. What? If you go to the pet store, you can see a ferret. Lots of people keep those as pets these days. Oh, I lost it again. And Charlie's pretty awesome because he gave like their scientific name too. Charlie's just amazing right now. The stoat is I'm probably not going to say it right. Mustela armenia. That's the stoat. And a weasel is a mustela. And a Mustela pretorius furrow is the same genus as the weasel. So Charlie's my science man. I already showed you that. Okay. And then Joanna asked the other day, 8 days ago, poor Joanna, if Anne of Green Gables is a good book. I absolutely love Anne of Green Gables. It's kind of old-fashioned, so you have to be in that mindset. It's one of those classics, like I talked about at the beginning of Wind in the Willows, and how you start reading it and you're like, this is old, and then you think you can't get anything out of it. But Anne of Green Gables is one of my favorites from when I was a kid, and there's a whole series. But Anne of Green Gables is about a girl who's an orphan, and she's kind of peculiar. She walks. I always say kids like this are like they walk to the beat of their own drummer, so they don't like act the way everybody else acts. They're not bad, these kind of kids. But she gets adopted by this brother and sister who are really elderly that live together, and they wanted a boy to help around the farm, but they decided to keep her. And it's just really cool seeing how much she changes and grows. And I highly recommend Anne of Green Gables. If I do any more reading this summer, I might read that one because it's awesome. Okay. Chapter 12, The Return of Ulysses. I don't know who that Ulysses is that they're referring to here, unless it's the Ulysses of Roman times or something. I know he was like a sailor, Ulysses. Right? I know what I'm talking about. My daughter was making me feel like I didn't know what I was talking about, but I think I do. Okay, so Toad kind of came back and they're setting up to go and take over Toad Hall, which I still have lots of questions. If Toad was taken to jail and he's escaped, they know where he lives. Why would they not just go get him? But whatever. Fiction, right? We got to let it go. Okay, chapter 12, The Return of Ulysses. The last chapter, and we're finishing this book. It's crazy. Okay, when it began to grow dark, the rat, with an air of excitement and mystery, summoned them back into the parlor and stood each of them alongside of his little heap and proceeded to dress them up for the coming expedition. Now remember, Badger said, we don't need any weapons. And Rat was like, yes, we do. And so he made all these preparations. He was very earnest and thoroughgoing about it, and the affair took quite a long time. First, there was a belt to go around each animal, and then a sword to be stuck into each belt, and then a cutlass on the other side to balance it. Then a pair of pistols, a policeman's truncheon. It's their stick, a policeman's stick that they used in the old-timey days. Oh, they still have them now. They're just, they do. Yeah, they do. Several sets of handcuffs. Where'd they get all this stuff? Some bandages and sticking plaster, and a flask and a sandwich case. The Badger laughed good-humoredly and said, all right, Ratty, it amuses you, and it doesn't hurt me. I'm going to do all I've got to do with this here stick. But the Rat only said, please, Badger, you know I shouldn't like you to blame me afterwards and say I'd forgotten anything. So he even put in a snack. When all were quite ready, the Badger took a dark lantern in one paw, grasped his great stick with the other, and said, now then, follow me. Mole first, because I'm very pleased with him. Rat next, and Toad last. And look here today, Toady. Don't you chatter so much as usual, or you'll be sent back as sure as fate. The Toad was so anxious not to be left out that he took up the inferior position assigned to him without a murmur, and the animals set off. The Badger led them along by the river for a little way, and then suddenly swung himself over the edge into a hole in the riverbank a little above the water. And then suddenly, the Mole and the Rat followed silently, swinging themselves successfully into the hole as they had seen the Badger do. But when it came to be Toad's turn, of course, he managed to slip and fall into the water with a loud splash and a squeal of alarm. He was hauled out by his friends, rubbed down and wrung out hastily, comforted and set on his legs, but the Badger was seriously angry and told him that the very next time he made a fool of himself, he would most certainly be left behind. So at last they were in the secret passage, and the cutting out expedition had really begun. It was cold and dark and damp and low and narrow, and poor Toad began to shiver, partly from dread of what might be before him, partly because he was wet through. The lantern was far ahead, and he could not help lagging behind a little in the darkness. Then he heard the Rat call out warningly, come on, Toad, and a terror seized him of being left behind, alone in the darkness, and he came on with such a rush that he upset the Rat into the Mole and the Mole into the Badger, and for a moment all was confusion. He ran into him. He ran so fast. You know, when you're walking in line at school, I see this happen all the time, and you're not paying attention to where you're going, or the person behind you is not. And suddenly the line stops and that person has no clue and they just run smack dab into you and everybody kind of teeters forward. The Badger thought they were being attacked from behind, and as there was no room to use a stick or a cutlass, he drew his pistol and was at the point of putting a bullet into Toad when he found out what had really happened. He was very angry indeed, and he said, now this time that tiresome Toad shall be left behind. But Toad whimpered, and the other two promised that they would be answerable for his good conduct. And at last the Badger was pacified, and the procession moved on. Only this time the Rat brought up the rear with a firm grip on Toad's shoulder. There's a picture here of them. They're so cute. And off they go, ready for anything. That's when Toad's falling in. Look at him, he's falling over. So they groped and shuffled along with their ears pricked up and their paws on their pistols till at last the badger said, "We ought by now to be pretty nearly under the hall." Then suddenly they heard, far away as it might be, and yet apparently nearly over their heads, a confused murmur of sound, as if people were shouting and cheering and stamping on the floor and hammering on tables. The toad's nervous terrors all returned, but the badger only remarked placidly, "They are going it to the weasels." The passage now began to slope upwards. They groped onward a little farther, and then the noise broke out again, quite distinct this time and very close above them. "Ooray, ooray, ooray, ooray," they heard, and the stamping of little feet on the floor, and the clinking of glasses as little fists pounded on the table. "What a time they're having," said Badger. "Come on." They hurried along the passage till it came to a full stop, and they found themselves standing under the trapdoor that led up into the butler's pantry. Such a tremendous noise was going on in the banqueting hall that there was little danger of their being overheard. The badger said, "Now, boys, all together," and the four of them put their shoulders to the trapdoor and heaved it back. Hoisting each other up, they found themselves standing in the pantry with only a door between them and the banqueting hall where their unconscious enemies were carousing. The noise, as they emerged from the passage, was simply deafening. At last, as the cheering and hammering slowly subsided, a voice could be made out saying, "Well, I do not propose to detain you much longer." Great applause. Clap, 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 clap. But before I resume my seat, yay, renewed cheering, I should like to say one word about our kind host, Mr. Toad. We all know Toad. Ha 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 ha. Everybody's laughing. Good Toad, modest Toad, honest Toad. Shrieks of merriment. Because is he good or honest or modest? No. Only just let me get at him, muttered Toad, grinding his teeth. "Hold hard a minute," said the badger, restraining him with difficulty. "Get ready, all of you. Let me sing you a little song," went on the voice, "which I have composed on the subject of Toad." Oh, yay, prolonged applause. Then the chief weasel, for it was he, began in a high, squeaky voice, "Toad he went a pleasuring happily down the street." The badger drew himself up, took a firm grip at his stick with both paws, glanced around at his comrades, and cried, "The hour is come! Follow me!" and flung the door open wide. My, what a squealing and a squeaking and a screeching filled the air. Well might the terrified weasels dive under the tables and spring madly up at the windows. Well might the ferrets rush wildly for the fireplace and get hopelessly jammed in the chimney. Well might tables and chairs be upset and glass and china be sent crashing on the floor in the panic of that terrible moment when the four heroes strode wrathfully into the room. The mighty badger, his whiskers bristling, was his great cudgel whistling through the air, Mole, black and grim, brandishing his stick and shouting his awful war cry, "A mole! A mole!" Rat, desperate and determined, his belt bulging with weapons of every age and every variety. Toad, frenzied with excitement and injured pride, swollen to twice his ordinary size, leaping into the air and emitting toad whoops that chilled them to the bones. "Toady went a pleasuring," he yelled. "I'll pleasure 'em!" And he went straight for the chief weasel. They were but four in all, but to the panic-stricken weasels, the hall seemed full of monstrous animals, gray, black, brown, and yellow, whooping and flourishing enormous cudgels, and they broke and fled with squeals of terror and dismay, this way and that, through the windows, up the chimney, anywhere to get out of reach of those terrible sticks. The affair was soon over. Up and down the whole length of the hall strode the four friends, whacking with their sticks at every head that showed itself, and in 5 minutes the room was clear. Through the broken window, the shrieks of terrified weasels escaping across the lawn were borne faintly to their ears. On the floor lay prostrate some dozen or so of the enemy, on whom the mole was busily engaged in fitting handcuffs. The badger, resting from his labors, leaned on his stick and wiped his honest brow. Mole, you are the best of fellows. Just cut along outside and look after those stoat sentries of yours and see what they're doing. I have an idea that thanks to you, we shan't have much trouble with them tonight. The mole vanished promptly through a window, and the badger bade the other two set up a table on its legs again, pick up knives and forks and plates and glasses from the debris on the floor, and see if they could find materials for a supper. I want some grub, I do, he said, in that rather common way he had of speaking. Stir your stumps, Toad, and look lively. We've got your house back for you, and you don't offer us so much as a sandwich. Toad felt rather hurt that Badger didn't say pleasant things to him, as he had to Mole, and tell him what a fine fellow he was and how splendidly he had fought, for he was rather particularly pleased with himself and the way he had gone for the Chief Weasel and sent him flying across the table with one blow of his stick. But he bustled about, and so did the rat, and soon they found some guava jelly in a glass dish, and a cold chicken, a tongue that had hardly been touched. Y'all like tongue? I don't think I've ever had it, but I don't think I want it. Some trifle and quite a lot of lobster salad. And in the pantry, they came upon a basket full of French rolls and a huge quantity of cheese, butter, and celery. They were just about to sit down when the mole clambered in through the window, chuckling with an armful of rifles. It's all over, he reported. From what I can make out, as soon as the stoats, who were very nervous and jumpy already, heard the shrieks and the yells and the uproar inside the hall, some of them threw down their rifles and fled. The others stood fast for a bit, but when the weasels came rushing out upon them, they thought they were betrayed, and the stoats grappled with the weasels, and the weasels fought to get away, and they wrestled and wriggled and punched each other and rolled over and over till most of them rolled into the river. They're all disappeared by now, one way or another, and I've got their rifles, so that's all right. Excellent and deserving animals, said the badger, his mouth full of chicken and trifle. Now, there's just one more thing I want you to do, Mole, before you sit down to your supper along with us. And I wouldn't trouble you, only I know I can trust you to see a thing done, and I wish that I could say the same of everyone I know. I'll send the rat if he wasn't a poet. I want you to take those fellows on the floor there upstairs with you and have some bedrooms cleaned out and tidied up and made really comfortable. See that they sweep under the beds and put clean sheets and pillowcases on and turn down one corner of the bedclothes, just as you know it ought to be done, and have a can of hot water and a clean towels and fresh cakes of soap put in each room. And then you can give them a licking apiece if it's of any satisfaction to you, and put them out by the back door. We shan't see any more of them, I fancy. And then come along and have some of this cold tongue. It's first rate. I'm very pleased with you, Mole. The good-natured Mole picked up a stick, formed his prisoners up in a line on the floor, gave them the order, quick march, and led his squad off to the upper floor. After a time, he appeared again, smiling, and said that every room was ready and as clean as a new pin. And I didn't have to lick them either, he added. I thought on the whole they'd had licking enough for one night, like being hit. And the weasels, when I put the point to them, quite agreed with me and said they wouldn't think of troubling me. They were very penitent and said they were extremely sorry for what they had done, but it was all the fault of the Chief Weasel and the stoats. And if ever they could do anything for us at any time to make it up, we had only got to mention it. So I gave them a roll apiece and let them out the back, and off they ran as hard as they could. Then the mole pulled up his chair to the table and pitched into the cold tongue, and Toad, like the gentleman he was, put all his jealousy from him and said heartily, "Thank you kindly, dear Mole, for all your pains and trouble tonight, and especially for your cleverness this morning." The badger was pleased at that and said, "There spoke my brave Toad." So they finished their supper in great joy and contentment, and presently retired to rest between clean sheets, safe in Toad's ancestral home, won back by matchless valor, consummate strategy, and a proper handling of sticks. The following morning, Toad, who had overslept himself as usual, came down to breakfast disgracefully late and found at the table a certain quantity of eggshells, some fragments of cold and leathery toast, a coffee pot now 3/4 empty, and really very little else, which did not tend to improve his temper, considering that after all it was his house. Through the French windows of the breakfast room, he could see the mole and the water rat sitting in wicker chairs out on the lawn, evidently telling each other stories, roaring with laughter and kicking their short legs up in the air. The badger, who was in an armchair and deep in the morning paper, merely looked up and nodded when Toad entered the room. But Toad knew his man, so he sat down and made the best breakfast he could, merely observing to himself that he would get square with the others sooner or later. He's going to get even with them because they didn't leave him any breakfast. When he had nearly finished, the badger looked up and remarked rather shortly, "I'm sorry, Toad, but I'm afraid there's a heavy morning's work in front of you. You see, we really ought to have a banquet at once to celebrate this affair. It's expected of you. In fact, it's the rule." "Oh, all right," said the Toad readily. "Anything to oblige. Though why on earth you should want to have a banquet in the morning, I cannot understand. But you know I do not live to please myself." Yes, he does. "But merely to find out what my friends want, and then try to arrange it for 'em, dear old badger." "Don't pretend to be stupider than you really are," replied the badger crossly. "And don't chuckle and splutter in your coffee while you're talking. It's not manners. What I mean is, the banquet will be at night, of course, but the invitations will have to be written and got off at once, and you've got to write them. Now sit down at that table. There's stacks of letter paper on it, with Toad Hall at the top in blue and gold, and write invitations to all our friends, and you will stick to it. And if you stick to it, we shall get them out before luncheon. And I'll bear a hand to and take my share of the burden. I'll order the banquet." "What?" cried Toad, dismayed. "Me stop indoors and write a lot of rotten letters on a jolly morning like this, when I want to go around my property and set everything and everybody to rights and swagger about and enjoy myself? Certainly not. I'll see you. Stop a minute, though. Why, of course, dear badger. What is my pleasure or convenience compared to that with others? Your wish is done. It shall be done. Go, badger. Order the banquet. Order what you like. Then join our young friends outside in their innocent mirth, oblivious of me and my cares and toils. I sacrifice this fair morning on the altar of duty and friendship." So starts off really, really complaining, and then he switches just right in the middle, he switches. So the badger looked at him very suspiciously, as do I. But Toad's frank, open facial expression, countenance, made it difficult to suggest any unworthy motive in this change of attitude. He quitted the room accordingly in the direction of the kitchen, and as soon as the door had closed behind him, Toad hurried to the writing table. He would write the invitations, and he would take care to mention the leading part he had taken in the fight, and how he had laid the chief weasel flat, and he would hint at his adventures and what a career of triumph he had to tell about. And on the flyleaf, he would give a short sort of program of entertainment for the evening, something like this, as he sketched it out in his head: "Speech by Toad." There will be other speeches by Toad during the evening. "Address, synopsis, our prison system, the waterways of Old England, horse stealing and how to deal, property, its rights and its duties, back to the land, a typical English squire." That's going to be by Toad as well. "A song by Toad, composed by himself, and other compositions by Toad will be sung in the course of the evening by the composer, Toad." The idea pleased him mightily, and he worked very hard and got all the letters finished by noon, at which hour it was reported to him that there was a small and rather bedraggled weasel at the door, inquiring timidly, "That must be Coke Zero. It tastes funny, but that's okay. It's better. Less sugar. Not better. Cokes are bad." So the little weasel's there, and he's asking if he could be of service. Toad swaggered out and found it was one of the prisoners of the previous evening, very respectful and anxious to please. He patted him on the head, shoved the bundle of invitations into his paw, and told him to cut along quick and deliver them as fast as he could. And if he liked to come back again in the evening, perhaps there might be a shilling for him. Or again, perhaps there might not. And the poor weasel seemed really quite grateful and hurried off eagerly to do his mission. When the other animals came back to luncheon, very boisterous and breezy after a morning on the river, the mole, whose conscience had been pricking at him, looked doubtfully at Toad, expecting to find him sulky or depressed. Instead, he was so uppish and inflated that the mole began to suspect something, while the rat and the badger exchanged significant glances. So I guess they think that he's up to something as well. As soon as the meal was over, Toad thrust his paws deep into his trouser pockets, remarked casually, "Well, look after yourselves, you fellows. Ask for anything you want," and he swaggered off in the direction of the garden, where he wanted to think out an idea or two for his coming speeches when the rat caught him by the arm. Toad rather suspected what he was after and did his best to get away, but when the badger took him firmly by the other arm, he began to see that the game was up. The two animals conducted him between them into the small smoking room that opened out of the entrance hall, shut the door, and put him into a chair. They both stood in front of him while Toad sat silent and regarded them with much suspicion and ill humor. "Now look here, Toad," said the rat. "It's about this banquet, and very sorry I am to have to speak to you like this, but we want you to understand clearly, once and for all, that there are going to be no speeches and no songs. Try and grasp the fact that on this occasion we're not arguing with you, we're just telling you." Toad saw that he was trapped. They understood him. They saw through him. They had got ahead of him. His pleasant dream was shattered. "Maybe I sing just one little song?" he pleaded piteously. "No, not one little song," replied the rat firmly, though his heart bled as he noticed the trembling lip of the poor disappointed Toad. "It's no good, Toady. You know well that your songs are all conceit and boasting and vanity, and your speeches are all self-praise and, well, gross exaggeration and gas," put the badger in his common way. "It's for your own good, Toady," went on the rat. "You know you must turn over a new leaf sooner or later, and now seems a splendid time to begin, a sort of turning point in your career. Please don't think that saying all this doesn't hurt me more than it hurts you." Toad remained a long while plunged in thought. At last he raised his head, and the traces of strong emotion were visible on his features. "You have me conquered, my friends," he said in broken accents. "It was, to be sure, but a small thing that I had asked, merely leave to the blossom and yet expand for one yet." He wants to be like a flower. "Merely leave to blossom and expand for yet one more evening, to let myself go and hear the tumultuous applause that always seems to me somehow to bring out my best qualities. However, you are right, I know, and I am wrong. Henceforth, I will be a very different Toad. My friends, you shall never have occasion to blush for me again. But oh dear, this is hard work." And pressing his handkerchief to his face, "I know," said the badger gloomily. "Hey, I got a connection is unstable. If you could give me a like to let me know that everything's fine, I'd appreciate it. And that way I know that I'm not all garbly." Okay, there was a like. Thank you. I think we're good to go. And then it went away. Oh, there it is again. Wonder if people are unliking and then liking again. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. "But the thing had to be done." This is Badger talking. "This good fellow has got to live here and hold his own and be respected. Um, Would you have him a common laughing-stock, mocked and jeered by the stoats and the weasels?" "Of course not," said the rat. "And talking of weasels, it's lucky we came upon that little weasel just as he was setting out with Toad's invitation. I suspected something from what you told me and had a look at one or two. They were simply disgraceful. I confiscated the lot, and the good mole is now sitting in the blue room filling up plain, simple invitation cards." So they caught him with the invitations that he was making that were horrible. Poor Toad, but not. At last the hour for the banquet began to draw near, and Toad, who on leaving the others had retired to his bedroom and was sitting there, melancholy and thoughtful, his brow resting on his paw, he pondered long and deeply. Gradually, his countenance cleared, his face, so he's looking kind of gloomy, and then it went back to normal. And he began to smile, long, slow smiles. Then he took to giggling in a shy, self-conscious manner. At last he got up, locked the door, drew the curtains across the windows, collected all the chairs in the room and arranged them in a semicircle, and took up his position in front of them, swelling visibly. Then he bowed, coughed twice, and let himself go. With uplifted voice he sang to the enraptured audience that his imagination so clearly saw. Toad's little last song. Okay, I'm not singing. I'll rap it. No, I'm just kidding. The toad came home. There was panic in the parlor and howling in the hall. There was crying on the cowshed and shrieking in the stall when Toad came home. When Toad came home, there was smashing in of window and crashing in of door. There was chiving of weasels that fainted on the floor when Toad came home. Bang go the drums. The trumpeters are tooting, and the soldiers are saluting, and the cannon they are shooting, and the motor cars are hooting as the hero comes. Shout hooray! And let each one of the crowd try and shout it very loud in honor of an animal of whom you're justly proud, for it's Toad's great day. He sang this very loud with great unction and expression, and when he was done, he sang it all over again. Then he heaved a deep sigh, a long, long sigh. Sorry, I swallowed wrong, like my spit. How does that happen? My body knows how to work. Then he dipped his hairbrush in the water jug, parted his hair in the middle, and plastered it down very straight and sleek on each side of his face. I'm still a little surprised that Toad has hair, but okay. And unlocking the door, he went quietly down the stairs to greet his guests, who he knew must be assembling in the drawing room. All the animals cheered when he entered and crowded around him to congratulate him and say nice things about his courage and his cleverness and his fighting qualities. But Toad only smiled faintly and murmured, "Not at all," or sometimes for a change, "Oh, on the contrary." Otter, who was standing in the hearthrug, at the hearthrug, describing to an admirable circle of friends exactly how he would have managed things had he been there, came forward with a shout, threw his arm around Toad's neck, and tried to take him round the room to triumphal progress. But Toad, in a mild way, was rather snubby to him, remarking gently as he disengaged himself, "Badgers was the mastermind, and the mole and the water rat bore the brunt of the fighting. I merely served in the ranks and did little or nothing." He's being different. The animals were evidently puzzled and taken aback by this unexpected attitude, and Toad felt, as he moved from one guest to the other, making his modest responses, that he was the object of absorbing interest to everyone. The Badger had ordered everything of the best, and the banquet was a great success. There was much talking and laughter among the animals, but through all, Toad, who of course was in the chair, looked down his nose and murmured pleasant nothings to the animals on either side of him. At intervals, he stole a glance at the badger and the rat, and always when he looked, they were staring at each other with their mouths open, and that gave him the greatest satisfaction. Some of the younger and livelier animals, as the evening wore on, got whispering to each other that things were not so amusing as they used to be in the good old days. And there were some knockings on the tables and cries of, "Toad's speech, speech from Toad, song, Mr. Toad's song." But Toad only shook his head gently, raised one paw in mild protest, and by pressing delicacies on his guests, by typical small talk, and by earnest inquiries after members of their families not yet old enough to appear at social functions, he managed to convey to them that this dinner was being run on strictly conventional lines. He was indeed an altered Toad. I can't believe it. I'm just like Badger and Rat with my mouth open. And inside, I'm like, is this for real or is it just for tonight? After this amazing dinner, the four animals continued to lead their lives, so rudely broken in upon by civil war, in great joy and contentment, undisturbed by further risings or invasion. Toad, after due consultation with his friends, selected a handsome gold chain and a locket set with pearls, which he dispatched to the jailer's daughter with a letter that even the badger admitted to be modest, grateful, and appreciative. And the engine driver, in his turn, was properly thanked and compensated for all his pains and troubles. Under severe compulsion from the badger, even the barge woman, with some trouble, was sought out, and the value of her horse discreetly made good to her, though Toad kicked terribly at this, holding himself to be an instrument of fate, sent to punish fat women with mottled arms who couldn't tell a real gentleman when they saw one. The amount involved, it was true, was not very burdensome, and the gypsy's valuation being admitted by local assessors to be approximately correct. Sometime in the course of the long summer evenings, the friends would take a stroll together in the wild wood, now successfully tamed so far as they were concerned, and it was pleasing to see how respectfully they were greeted by the inhabitants, and how the mother weasels would bring their young ones to the mouths of their holes and say, pointing, "Look, baby, there goes the great Mr. Toad, and that's the gallant water rat, a terrible fighter, walking along with him, and yonder comes the famous Mr. Mole, of whom you so often heard your father tell." But when their infants were fractions and quite beyond control, they would quiet them down by telling how, if they didn't hush and not fret them, the terrible gray badger would up and get them. This was a base libel on Badger. They were saying bad things about Badger, who, though he cared little about society, was rather fond of children, but it never failed to have its full effect. The end. Toad changed. How can it be that Toad changed? Toad doesn't have hair in this picture. All right, Wind in the Willows, guys. I hope you liked it. It's kind of weird reading something old. Okay, Time Cat is the next one, friends. So the premise of Time Cat is that the cat takes the cat's name is Gareth, and the boy's name is Jason, and they travel all over the world in different time periods. So they time travel to all these different places, and they see how cats are treated, and they finally get back to America, 1775, right before the American Revolution. So it's a pretty fun little story. It's a normal cat until he starts talking. It's cute. I like it. So Time Cat is next. It will start tomorrow at 7 o'clock. I hope you all enjoyed Wind in the Willows, and I will see you guys tomorrow evening. Bye.